Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to the second lecture of NLP. So in the previous lecture, we went over the course outline and discussed the various policies that we will be following in this course, including the grading. And then we started discussing the introduction to NLP. We motivated NLP with some examples, some popular examples. And then we also talked about why NLP is hard. Uh, and We will be starting from this point onwards today. Today, basically, we will complete the introduction and then jump into a primer of linguistics. So, NLP, as you know, is natural language, and natural language uh, is linguistic. Linguistic is an area of study that studies language. So there are various terminologies that are derived from or taken from linguistics. So it is always a good idea to refresh ourselves regarding linguistics. Uh, so that is the idea for today. Uh, I have posted an announcement for the recordings of the videos. The recording of the videos are going to be available on YouTube on the CADE Lab LUMS channel. I sent out the announcement on LMS as well as you must have received it in your email box. So usually the videos would be uploaded the day after the lecture. And of course, if you subscribe, you will get a notification whenever there's an update to the channel. Okay. So before I move any further, is there any question or comments? Okay, so apparently, so there is no question. Let me share my screen. So can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. So these are the slides for the introduction. I actually updated it a little bit and uploaded the new version yesterday night. So if you have copied it from the previous lecture, you might want to copy it again. Uh, so last time we basically discussed some applications of NLP, and then we talked about why NLP is difficult. So NLP, as we mentioned last time, is natural language processing, computational methods for processing natural language. And one of the reasons for NLP being difficult is it is ambiguous. Natural language is ambiguous. Even though we have rules or grammar available for us for writing correct language, those rules are quite relaxed, or in other words, we can violate those rules and still have valid writing. But this makes things difficult for the computer. For humans, it might be easier, but for computer, it's much more difficult. So headlines are usually very short phrases or sentences, and they can be ambiguous. And ambiguity could be from a number of reasons, because of uh, world knowledge, because of multiple usage of a particular word, because of uh, prior history or knowledge of a particular case. So it depends on so many things. But a small heading or small set of words uh, in of itself may not convey the complete meaning. So you need to know the context, or you need to know the bigger picture to understand it in a better way. For computers, that is difficult. And of course, if you want to incorporate context, you need to bring it other knowledge and bring it into the computer and let the computer know what the world knowledge is. So that is one of the issues, ambiguity. And we also discussed this slide last time. So natural language is difficult for several reasons. There are some other reasons given here. So there could be idioms that we use. Idioms do not translate literally. So there could be other issues like informal language. There could be issues of segmentation, word segmentation. This also occurs primarily in informal languages. And you also have issues with named entities, uh, names of companies, organizations, people. They might be uh, ambiguous. For example, names of a movie, uh, for example, The Bug's Life. So this is actually a phrase, a small sentence, or you can say a small portion of uh, a bigger sentence. But bug is something else and life is something else. But if you know that this is a movie, then you will interpret the sentence differently. But if you don't know that this is a movie, then you will interpret the sentence somewhat differently. So these are some of the issues that arise with NLP. And what is our solution? And of course, we'll be discussing solutions throughout this course. So the task is difficult. So, but of course, we do need some tools and techniques. So the primary technique that is used nowadays is probability theory, or you can say statistics, or the prevalence of occurrences of languages from whatever that has been written. So we need actually two things through statistics or through probability. We need knowledge of the language and knowledge about the world. So if we can incorporate both of this to some degree and to a high degree, then we should be able to solve most NLP problems effectively. But both of these tasks are difficult. Knowledge of the language, as I said, language is ambiguous. How do you gather knowledge of the language? And then knowledge of the world is quite vast. So there are so many small things and big things. Small things could be, for example, the fact that fire is hot. Computer doesn't know this, that fire is hot. And also, as I mentioned last time, father is a male, mother is a female, and there are many other things associated with regards to world knowledge. And then, of course, we will need to combine various sources to make a solution. So how do we generally do this? As I said, we do this through probability theory, or you can say through statistics. And there is a small example given here, but I think I won't go over that. You will get a better idea throughout this course. We will be doing some of this later on as well. So briefly, so to give you an example, so let's say we have Lahore University of Management Sciences. This is a sequence of words, Lahore University of Management Sciences, right? What is the probability of this sequence from a large corpus of uh, writings, let's say the web, as opposed to the probability of another sequence, University Lahore of Management or University Lahore of Science Management? Which probability would be higher, the first one or the second one?
Sir, the first one.
The first one, because that word, that sequence of words is used repeatedly or will be used repeatedly in correct writings, while the second sequence of words, which is University Lahore of Science Management, doesn't make any sense and would not be used in writings. Okay? So So this is one of the ideas that we'll be using. And of course, there's another idea of representation, which I'll mention in the next slide as well. So is there any question here before I move on to the next slide? Of course, we'll be discussing this in more detail. This is just intro, just you can say a you can say a teaser, you can say.
So it's clear.
Okay. So I added this slide yesterday night. So in the past 3-4 years, significant developments have occurred in NLP. Of course, in the past 15 years, machine learning has become the mainstay of NLP. Before that, in the 1990s and maybe early 2000, uh, rule-based NLP was quite popular. Now, since then, machine learning has gained more traction in NLP. And then in the past 3-4 years, uh, deep learning has become very popular in NLP, and it has produced amazing results uh, to some extent. So, what are the key trends here? So, one trend is you can learn a language from text. And of course, text is widely available. So, the web is text, books are text, Wikipedia is text. So, you can learn a language, which means the words, the grammar, the rules, the semantics, everything from just normal, correct writings. So, and we can do this without labels because labels are already there in the language. So, for example, you can learn. So, I've written the sentence Lahore University of Management Sciences. So, this is a sequence of words. So, we use the preceding sequence of words Lahore University of, and we predict the probability of management. Obviously, Lahore University of is occurring, and then management occurs. That probability would be higher as opposed to some other word. And of course, you can learn this from text. You don't need any label. Label is already there. Management is already there. So language modeling, of course, was traditional n-grams, which we will study, to modern deep learning language models, which are sequential models. Uh, and the most recent sequential model is a transformer. And if you follow the trend in NLP in the last 2-3 years, there's a transformer race going on. So everyone is coming up with another transformer, and there are various names that I've listed here. So GPT is from OpenAI. So GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3. GPT stands for Generalized Pre-trained Transformer. And then there is something from Google, which is called T5, and of something from Microsoft, which is uh, the Turing NLG, Natural Language Generator. And actually, there is something else more recently as well beyond this, which is also released recently. I just saw that. So these are trends that are shaping uh, NLP nowadays. So other main thing is feature representation. So I mentioned language modeling. The other is feature represent. So we're representing now words not by the sequence of characters in it, but some uh, vector of continuous values that captures the semantics as well as syntax. And that is its representation. And we learn this representation from data directly. Okay? And in this way, we can integrate both corpus information as well as knowledge bases. So knowledge bases could be like dictionary, it could be Wikipedia even, it could be ontologies. Like I mentioned that the fact that hot, sorry, fire is hot, how do you learn that? You learn it from maybe an ontology which has captured this information in some structure. But to use it in NLP, you need to represent it in some way. So feature representation is important. And of course, you can combine representations from knowledge bases and corpus together to make a solution. The third trend is transfer learning. So transfer learning means that you train your model on related task and then apply it to new task. And primarily there are two ways of transfer learning. So you learn representation for linguistic units, for example, word embeddings, and then use those representations in your applications like clustering, classification, NER, word sense disambiguation, and so on. That's one way. The other way is you actually learn entire models on related tasks and then adapt those models. Actually, जो मैंने ऊपर लिखे थे models GPT-2, GPT-2, 3, and T5, all of those are pre-trained models. So you can simply take those models and adapt them to your setting. ठीक है? Any questions?
No, sir.
जी. So for example, so GPT-3 or GPT is from OpenAI, which now actually commercializes this API as well. So, so if you study this, there is also because these machines or these pre-trained models are so powerful that they can also generate or they can also be used in ways that are non-ethical, not ethical. So that's also a debate that has started in recent times. So you can find all of these here. So let me see. So you can check the Wikipedia page, that's better. So GPT-3, as you can go through this on your own time after class, but GPT-3 has over 170 billion parameters. And it's trained on tons and tons of data. So the entire Wikipedia is just 3% of the data that's given to GPT-3. The entire Wikipedia is just 3%. The entire web, which includes everything, the entire crawl is just 60%. So GPT-3, for example, can be used to or can be adapted to do many things. For example, it can be used to, for example, conversate with you in a natural way. It can be used to in essay generation, for example. You can give some topics and it will generate an essay for you. You can also use it in chatbots, for example. ठीक है? So you can read this on your own time later on. So I will move on from this if there is no question. So GPT-3 has 170 billion parameters. Recently, Google has created another transformer that has 1 trillion parameters. So that's even bigger. So anyway, so you can look at this at your own time. All right. So any questions so far? So NLP is it's kind of a confluence of various fields nowadays, and all of these fields contribute to NLP. And if you are good in all of these fields, then it will help you in NLP as well. Of course, the first one is statistics and probability. The second is machine learning, and you can also include AI. So data structures and algorithms are important because you need to design efficient algorithms, efficient implementations. And of course, linguistics, which is you can say, the social science that we are trying to now model through science. And psychology. So language deals with humans and it deals with human behavior. So psychology plays a big role. Of course, we are not directly dealing with psychology here, but psychology might give you some clues that you can then use in your computational models. So, for example, sometimes back we looked at psycholinguistic. We got an idea from psycholinguistic that people associate words uh, with the topic in which it is occurring most frequently. So, so we actually use this to develop a discriminative term weight, a measure that can identify such words, and then use that in our applications. So such ideas can be taken from psychology to build better computational models. So actually, this is just a short slide. I mean, obviously, you know this. For this course, you just need probability and statistics that you have already taken before. And of course, programming in some high level language, most probably Python. And some math as well, including linear algebra. Okay, so any questions so far before I move on to the next major topic?
Yes, sir. Can you please tell me the difference between feature representation and language modeling?
Uh, which representation? Can you repeat it?
Feature representation and language modeling.
Okay. Okay. So you said what is the difference between feature representation and language modeling? So actually, language modeling is a task. It's kind of, you can say, an end goal. In language modeling, we are essentially trying to predict next word given previous words. So as I said, if Lahore University of dash dash dash, what is going to be the best next word? Okay, so that is language modeling, and that kind of captures the rules of writing a language. And of course, it also captures, for example, in this particular case, Lahore University of Management Sciences is a named entity. It's a proper noun. It's the name of a company. Okay, na? So it captures those ideas as well. So this is language modeling. But when I talk about representation, so representation is it's a general concept. So you are trying to represent different entities for processing in a computer. So for example, Lahore, so this is a word. So you can represent it, of course, using the characters L, A, H, O, R, and E, right? Or maybe you can just give it an ID number, let's say ID 1 or ID 123, right? Which is just one index ID for representing Lahore among all the different words. So these are representations. So what modern day NLP does is it doesn't represent words in such a simple way. It represents it more in a rich way. So for example, Lahore might be represented by a vector of length 300. So 300 continuous values are representing the word Lahore. And in this representation, we capture the various nuances of this word, its usage in language, uh, its meaning, and so on. So all of these is hopefully captured in this much richer representation. So for example, the ID representation, जिसमें सिर्फ मैंने एक ID दे दिया 1 2 3, that doesn't tell us anything about what that word is. ठीक है ना? If I represented it by the sequence of characters, वो फिर भी आप जोड़ के आप बता सकते हैं कि ठीक है ये लाहौर बन रहा है. But a richer representation which has 300 continuous values is much more representative and would give us better results in NLP task. ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
All right. So now let me move on to linguistics. So this is just going to be a primer and an introduction to some keywords and some terms and terminologies, so that you are familiar with these terms and terminology, and you can then look up those for greater detail on the web. Okay. So let me I have a slide for that. Okay. So what is linguistic? So linguistic is the study of languages, and in the most general sense. And so you can say in terms of its form, its structure, its meaning, its syntax, its history, its so all of this is included in linguistic, right? So when we say context, context means context can be mean, for example, if you have a sentence and you're talking about a particular word, the context for that word would be the words around it. But in general, context could be much broader. It could be the entire document, it could be other resources as well. World knowledge, for example, can be context as well. Okay? Okay? So from a social sciences perspective, linguistic also includes other stuff. So historical perspective, cultural perspective, political perspectives, and so on. Because these perspectives shape language. And if you are able to understand these aspects of language, you should be able to better model them. So a linguistic, of course, is a person who is knowledgeable in linguistic. Okay? So, what are the main subfields in linguistic? And there are 7 or 8 main subfields, which I mentioned on this slide with a one-liner description. And of course, there are other subfields as well. But you will see these terminologies used once in a while during this course. So phonetics basically deals with uh, the generation of sound. Okay? How sounds are perceived and how sounds are used to define words. Okay? So phonetics and phonology are somewhat similar. So phonology is more about how we use sounds to distinguish meaning. So for example, so LIVE, live, and LIVE, live. So we pronounce them differently. And both this pronunciation distinguish their meaning. So live is like I am watching a cricket match live. ठीक है? So live here is uh, uh, basically is an adjective, I believe, and live is of course a verb. ठीक है? So phonology studies such concepts where speech, so you can think of intonation or expressiveness as part of phonology. So phonetics is more about physical characteristics of sound. ठीक है? So morphology is the study of words and their various variations. And of course, the rules governing those variations. And the simplest example, we'll talk about morphology again, I think probably next lecture. For example, there are different forms of a given word. So for example, run is ran also, run is running also. So life could be, uh, so, so think of any other word. So it has various inflections, inflected forms. So you can add some prefixes or suffixes to change those words. Okay? And those changes change the function of the word. The general meaning doesn't really change. So this is study of morphology. So syntax, I think you can understand syntax from formal languages as well, let's say like some programming language. So syntax are rules, or what are the rules to generate correct language. Okay? So this is syntax. And in the next slide, I will mention that syntax is related to grammar actually. So semantics, as the name suggests, is study of meaning and meaning of different linguistic units and how those meanings combine to form meanings of bigger units like sentences. So linguistic unit is also something that we'll be talking about on and off. So एक linguistic unit होता है कि कोई भी चीज जिसको आप represent करना चाह रहे हैं. It could be a word, it could be a character, it could be a phrase, it could be a clause, it could be a sentence, it could be a paragraph, it could be a document. ठीक है? That's a linguistic unit. ठीक है? So pragmatics is also about semantics or meaning, but here we look at meaning or how context and non language information or knowledge influence meaning. So this is pragmatics. So here world knowledge is important. So world knowledge plays a role in pragmatics. Okay? So discourse analysis, of course, analysis of reasonably large bodies of text. For example, you have a document, you have a section in a book. So that is discourse analysis. And here, basically, we are trying to find key trends in that passage. What are the key components that I expect previously? What are the key components that I express in the middle? What are the key components that I express at the end? To kind of build a narrative summary for the paragraph. So that's discourse analysis. So typology basically is comparative study of world languages. So this is kind of less relevant in our context. But no, I wouldn't say that. It is important because nowadays multilingual NLP is becoming very popular. So, so there's a lot of work going on not just English or uh, popular languages, but also on other languages like Arabic, Urdu, Hindi, and so on. So any questions here?
So could you explain a bit about the pragmatics?
So pragmatics, as I said, is a study of how context and world knowledge influence meaning. ठीक है? So सो इसमें एग्जाम्पल फॉर एग्जाम्पल आप ले सकते हैं कि So what the anything, for example, let's say मैं कहता हूँ Imran Khan is a word, it's a name, right? Uh, but world knowledge will tell me that Imran Khan at this point in time is the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Okay? So this understanding would only come from world knowledge. And if Imran Khan is used in a sentence and later on Prime Minister is also used, then we know that this is talking about the same thing, referring to the same thing. Okay? So meaning that is derived or understood through world knowledge would be pragmatics, and also meaning through context. Context, of course, कुछ भी हो सकता है उसी वर्ड के इर्द गिर्द अदर वर्ड्स हैं, उस वर्ड के प्रीवियसली कौन से और पैराग्राफ्स आ रहे हैं या सेक्शंस आ रहे हैं या चैप्टर्स आ रहे हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल. So all of this is pragmatics. And in modern day NLP, context काफी heavily हम यूज करते हैं, वर्ड नॉलेज भी यूज करते हैं. So pragmatics इनहेरेंटली हमारा इनबिल्ट होता है. जो हम फीचर रिप्रेजेंटेशन कर रहे हैं, वर्ड रिप्रेजेंटेशन कर रहे हैं, रिच, वो प्रैग्मेटिक्स को ही एम्बेड करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. So this slide has some other subfields which are kind of less relevant, but I put them here so that you understand. Because we are talking about linguistic per se, so some people spend their whole life studying linguistics from these perspectives. So historical, how languages evolve over time, how languages came into being, how words and meanings evolved over time. So for example, COVID, the word COVID only arrived last year. So for those who study historical linguistics, so this is part of their study. So cultures also influence languages. So cultural linguistics, for example, Arabic has so many dialects. So Egyptian Arabic, Saudi Arabic, Iraqi Arabic, and so that's different cultures have different dialects. So political linguistics, politics also influence linguistics uh, in the way that different regimes impose certain trends on languages. So over time, different regimes have different focuses. So social, of course, related to cultural as well. ठीक है. So psycholinguistic, of course, is linguistic derived or studied from the perspective of psychology. How human behaviors influence language. So biolinguistic is more biological oriented. So this is more about how human process languages. So more about the brain and the nervous system and stuff like that. And neurolinguistics is also the same thing. And then of course, computational linguistic, I mentioned this last lecture as well. So NLP is also known as computational linguistic. So computational linguistic is what we are mostly focusing on in this course, which is about computational methods for processing languages. ठीक है? So grammar. So you have heard this word grammar before, and you have studied grammar in school as well. Uh, so grammar is the rules that govern the construction of languages. And there are various linguistic units in languages. So there could be clauses, there could be phrases, there could be sentences, there could be paragraphs, as I mentioned earlier. And grammar defines, not very rigidly, but to some degree, how we should uh, arrange or use these components to make meaningful sentences. ठीक है? So what is a clause? I mean, the quick definitions are, although it's deep jayenge, so they are like sub definitions as well. We are not interested in that, but you need to know a little bit. So clause basically is a portion of a sentence that contains a subject and a verb. So एग्जाम्पल हो सकता है कि आई एम ईटिंग, ठीक है ना. सो और या आई लिव, so I live at on Bedia Road, for example. I live on Bedia Road. So there is live is a verb, I is a subject. Of course, Bedia Road here is an object. Okay. So this is a clause, but phrase is doesn't have this necessarily. So for example, he jumped, subject verb aa raha hai. This is a clause. But over the dog or over the cat or over the table जो है वो एक phrase है, उसमें subject नहीं है, उसमें verb नहीं है. But जब दोनों जोड़ देते हैं तो of course, and of course a phrase typically is not a complete sentence, पूरा meaning नहीं convey कर रहा होता. Clause कई दफा convey कर रहा होता because उसमें subject भी है, verb भी है. ठीक है. And of course, different classifications of phrases हैं, so उनके roles हैं, functional roles हैं, we won't go into that. So I said that earlier on that grammar is related to syntax. So syntax, as I mentioned before, is the study of how languages should be written to make them meaningful and correct. So grammar, of course, are the rules that are used to make it meaningful and correct. ठीक है? So is that fine? So part of speech is another concept which we'll be using, and we'll also be studying from, we'll also be dealing with how to detect parts of speech in natural language. So part of speech are various. So these are category of words that have similar function and usages in natural language. And you are familiar with some basic parts of speech like noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, uh, conjunction, interjection. But if you go into finer details, there could be up to 30, 40 parts of speech. But in most NLP, I think we would be fine by restricting ourselves to about 5 to 10 parts of speech. And the most important of them, I've listed them on the slide here. Okay. And of course, you need to have some idea about this definition. So go ahead and revise yourself on what is a noun. Noun is a name of something, place, or object. And of course, there's a proper noun, there are common nouns. So adjective kya hota hai? Adverb kya hota hai? So adjective basically something like excellent, bad. These are adjectives. So adverb kya hota hai? Adverb basically modify verbs or other adjectives. So for example, lively, uh, usually adjectives have a ly at the end of them. So uh, and then of course conjunction is tarah ho gaya, and, or, these are conjunctions. Interjections, but, nevertheless, nonetheless. So these are interjections. So lexicon is another term that is commonly used in NLP. So what is a lexicon? Lexicon in general or simply is a dictionary. So it's a collection of words or lexical units. So since these units are in a lexicon, we call them lexical units. But in general, as I said before, they could be linguistic units. Okay. So it's collection of such units. And of course, there could be some additional information with them. So a dictionary has their meaning, they have root words, uh, inflected forms of the words, and so on. Maybe some examples of the words as well, examples of the usage of the word. So for example, a thesaurus is much more detailed. A thesaurus contains things like synonyms and antonyms and stuff like that. So all of these, you can say, are resources, knowledge bases that uh, may be used in NLP. Okay. So any questions? All right. Okay, next we move on to the term named entity. So named entity are an entities that we actually name them, meaning that we say that this is a date or this is a person, this is a location, this is an organization, right? So entities of specific types. So usually these are words or groups of words, or of course in sequence. So a named entity, a person would be a name of a person like Asim Karim. It has two words in it. Okay. So for example, name of location, Lahore, Islamabad, Pakistan, whatever. These are all locations. Organizations could be LUMS or Lahore University of Management Sciences. There could be other things as well. As long as you're named the entity and then you are focusing on them, you call them named entity. So dates could also be part of named entities. Currency can be part of named entities. Uh, for example, values can also be part of named entities. ठीक है? So again, जैसे POS tagging का एक challenge होता है. So given some text, we want to identify the parts of speech that are used in it. ठीक है? Similarly, given a text, we want to identify what are the person names that are used in it. So ये हम NLP में पढ़ेंगे आगे जाके. What are the techniques to find out whether a person name is given in a particular sentence or not? ठीक है? Okay, one other terminology, a couple of other terminology is translation and transliteration. So translation is, of course, translating or converting one language to another language. Of course, you want to preserve the meaning. Okay? And we mentioned in the last class, like machine translation is now fairly well developed. You can easily go to Google Translate and translate multiple languages from one language to another language. So that's translation. So transliteration is converting from one script to another script. So a particular language can be written in multiple scripts. Of course, there is usually a native script, but oftentimes it is also written in other scripts. And of course, the typical example is Urdu. So Urdu native script is Perso-Arabic. So it is influenced by Persian and Arabic. That's the native script. But many of us use the English alphabets to write Urdu, and that Urdu is typically or commonly called Roman Urdu. And both of these have different, you can say, there are several differences. Of course, one difference is one is written from left to right, the other is written from right to left. Okay? But Roman Urdu is not formalized, and there is no well-defined dictionary, or no one really studies Roman Urdu at school. So everyone comes up with his own, for example, spelling. So kya ka spelling, someone would write it K-I-A, someone would write it K-Y-A. So there is no one spelling for it. So informality increases. But the task of converting from one script to another is called transliteration. And this is also, again, an important concept in modern NLP. Okay, so any questions?
No, sir.
All right. So let me just see कि आप लोग कितने हैं इधर. एक second.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. 23 students हैं sir.
33 अच्छा ठीक है.
23.
23 अच्छा
हाँ जी.
ठीक है. 23 students हैं. So actually on Zambil I think about 40 people are registered. So obviously online classes में थोड़ी सी attendance कम ही होती है, and of course I'm sharing the videos with you after class. उस वजह से भी issue होता है. But just a reminder again कि do attend lectures because that gives you an opportunity to ask questions and interact with me as well as even with others. Usually it should not be a one-way street. I should not be spending most of the time speaking. You can also speak and share ideas and discuss points and raise questions. Uh, so basically you can speak up whenever you want to. You can also send a quick message to me. Usually message मुझे मिल जाएगा, but let's say मैं quickly देखता नहीं हूँ, तो after some time when I pause you can speak up as well. ठीक है. All right. So now let's move on to the next main topic, which is text processing. And usme there's a whole set of new slides. Let me. All right, let me move here. So, okay, so we now move on to text processing, basic text processing. And so what is really text? Text is basically a sequence of.
Sir, एक slides change नहीं हुई.
जी अच्छा
Slides
वो
change नहीं हुई.
अच्छा वो नहीं विजिबल. अच्छा सॉरी, एक सेकेंड. अब विजिबल हुए?
No, sir.
नहीं सर, अभी वो previous है.
नहीं हुआ?
हाँ जी, अब हो गया.
हो गया?
और दोबारा सर चेंज हो गया. हाँ जी,
ये
अब
हो
हो
गया?
गया.
पेज नजर आ रहा है?
हाँ जी.
अच्छा ठीक है, गुड. So as I said, in the most basic form, text is a sequence of characters. ठीक है. So I am teaching NLP. So this is a sequence of characters, and of course, English characters are 26, but then of course you also have uppercase, lowercase. So that would make it 52. But then you have other characters as well. So for example, you can see space I. So there's a space between I and AM. So that's also a character, right? And then there could be other characters as well, punctuation marks, special characters, and so on. So all of these together in a sequence would be found in natural writings. Okay? And of course, ये इंग्लिश की बात हो रही है, तो जब हम उर्दू की बात करेंगे तो उर्दू में ऑफ कोर्स चीज़ें डिफरेंट हैं, उसके करेक्टर्स सेट डिफरेंट है. एंड ऑल्सो उर्दू मोस्ट जैसे इंग्लिश है, इट्स ए प्योरली लीनियर लैंग्वेज. प्योरली लीनियर का मतलब ये है कि यू कैन स्टार्ट फ्रॉम लेफ्ट एंड मूव राइट इन ए सीक्वेंस. ठीक है. उर्दू में ये होता है कि उर्दू के आपको पता ही है कि उसके करेक्टर लेट्स से फॉर एग्जांपल अलिफ है, अलिफ के ऊपर फिर कभी मदा भी होता है, कभी कुछ फतहा भी होता है, और चीज़ें भी होती हैं. तो समटाइम्स those are different characters. Yeah, sometimes the fatha and mada are different, so you need to be able to consider them together. So sometimes it is not very linear. इसी तरह there are some other languages जैसे Chinese है, Japanese है, they make symbols. उनके जो characters होते हैं, एक डब्बा सा जो बनाते हैं वो, उसमें symbols होते हैं, और those symbols usually don't have follow some linear behavior, but overall they convey something. Of course, I have no idea what Japanese and Chinese are, but Chinese languages, but that's what I know from some basic reading. ठीक है? But English में ये relatively straightforward है. ठीक है? All right. So, and of course, ये तो मैंने लिख के बताया, but of course जब आप कंप्यूटर पे करेंगे, there is a whole issue of encoding. ठीक है? तो आपकी लैंग्वेज किस तरह एनकोड हुई है. So encoding is basically mapping each character to some code that the computer can understand. ठीक है? So various encodings are available. The basic simple for which basic English works well is ASCII. आपको सबको पता होगा 128 characters की जो encoding है. ठीक है? But nowadays most processing is done using Unicode. And of course, Unicode की various variations हैं. You can look into the details, but this is more related to programming. But it's important that you understand this. So आजकल जितनी भी processing होगी, usually Unicode की होगी. For example, जैसे European languages हैं, तो European languages के character set is not the Latin character set that English uses. It has diacritics, for example. U के ऊपर 2 dots भी होंगे, E के ऊपर कुछ होगा, arrow सा होगा, so kind of dash सा होगा, and so on. So of course the character set is much larger. So Unicode typically is the standard nowadays, and of Unicode के different है. I think UTF-8 जो use होता है mostly. ठीक है? So okay, so this was just a quick overview what a language is. Now हमने simple string processing करनी है. So we are focusing now on string processing. ठीक है? So character level पे हम simple processing करना चाह रहे हैं. One of the simplest tasks that we would like to do is do matching. ठीक है? और ये आप काम काफी लोग करते हैं. Control F करते हैं. आपने कोई एक word search करना है. ठीक है? तो उसके लिए so there is a way of specifying a set of matches, and that way, which is actually a language, is called regular expression. ठीक है? और in short पे regex, regex. ठीक है? So regular expression आप लोगों ने I think multiple जगहों पे कुछ देखा होगा, but we will revise it again here as well. तो कहाँ देखा? Can someone remind me? किस कोर्स में आपने पढ़ा या किस प्रोग्रामिंग में पढ़ा?
So automata compile construction.
अच्छा, ठीक है. तो वहाँ of course formal languages थी आपके पास. So formal languages में of course syntax is well defined, but still the same concept can be used. मतलब regular expression can be used here to find some common sequences in natural language as well. ठीक है? So let me see. Shall I start this or shall I do it next time? Okay, let me open it then. Text processing. So these ये slide भी शायद मैंने upload कर दी थी. I'm not too sure. So of course these are also book slides. So and this slide I think I've not made many changes. तो standard book slides ही हैं. So regular expression, as I mentioned, is a formal language. Itself, this language is a set of strings. But वो string convey some information, and that information is then used to return a set of strings that matches that information. ठीक है? So pattern matching का जो formula है वो आप कह लें regex है. ठीक है? ठीक है? So यहाँ एक
Yes, sir.
example इन्होंने दी हुई है. So let's say if you want to you want to search for woodchuck and woodchuck with different variations. Let's say so woodchuck without capitals, with an S at the end, ठीक है, with a W capital, so and so on and so forth. ठीक है, तो इस तरह की चीजें multiple आपने words ढूंढने हैं. How can you specify this? So regex provides this flexibility. ठीक है, so it's a language by which you can specify a set of words. ठीक है. So the simplest form of a regular expression is, let me go to the notes maybe. So, so regular expression, as I said, is a sequence of characters. Or for writing purposes, and also as used in the book, I'll start the sequence regular expression with a slash and end it with a slash, just to make sure that everyone understands. This slash and slash are not part of the regular expression. They are just delimiters for us to understand that within these two slashes, we have a regular expression. Okay? So if I write something like ASIM as a regular expression, this would map literally with this sequence of characters. Exactly. So if I have a sentence like this, so would this ASIM be returned by the regular expression written above?
No, sir.
No, because उसमें रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन में ए स्मॉल था, जो मैंने यहाँ ए लिखा है वो बिग है, तो मैच नहीं होगा. तो इसको मैंने लेट्स से ये वाला ढूंढना है, तो मैं फिर इसको इस तरह लिखूंगा. So if my regular expression was capital A small s I m, then this asim would have been found. ठीक है ना? So एक तो ये direct literal matching है, which is quite understood. So by the way, ये जो मैं लिखा है, this is also a regular expression, but regular expression has some other rules as well special characters that tells us or tells the computer in a more precise fashion variations of words that you want to find. So let's say if I want to find both asim with a capital A and a small a, so I will use this variation which is called the disjunction thing. ठीक है? Square brackets के अंदर capital A और small a दोनों में लिखूंगा. ठीक है? So this would match A, which is capital, and small a, which is not capitalized A. Okay? So this would return both Asim and Asim. Okay? So this is the disjunction operator, one of the disjunction operators that is used. Of course, within those square brackets, you can have multiple characters. So let's say A, B, C, A, B, C. DE. ऑफ कोर्स ये भी रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन है, ठीक है। तो ये मैच होगा अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन BDE,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
राइट होगा ना, बिकॉज डिसजंक्शन में हमने कैपिटल B, सॉरी एक सेकेंड, कहाँ लिखा मैंने, एक सेकेंड, लेट मी राइट इट अगेन, मुझे नहीं पता मैंने किधर लिखा था। What I was writing was A, B, C, then A, B, C, D, E. So ABC कैपिटल और ABC स्मॉल दोनों चलेंगे और कोई भी इसमें हो सकता है। तो this would match, for example, A, D, E. This would also match B, D, E, small b, D, E. It will also match C, D, E. It will also match, for example, C, D, E, and so on. But it will not match, for example, A, B, D, E. Because उनमें उस डबल जो स्क्वायर ब्रैकेट के अंदर एक ही करेक्टर आ सकता है एज एन और, ठीक है।
Excuse me, sir.
जी।
Sir, is it language dependent? जैसे अगर हम Python में एक रेजिक्स लिखेंगे तो उसका सिंटैक्स डिफरेंट होगा, और अगर
Yes,
जावास्क्रिप्ट या किसी और
unfortunately
लैंग्वेज
that's somewhat true. That is somewhat,
Okay.
हाँ जी। Unfortunately ये है, there are a couple of standards that are out there. एक पर्ल बेस्ड है, एक शायद पाइथन बेस्ड है, थोड़ा सा फर्क है उन दोनों में, ठीक है। एंड आई एम नॉट 100%
Right, sir.
श्योर बुक में जो दिया हुआ है वो कौन सा वाला फॉलो कर रहे हैं, मेरे ख्याल से पर्ल वाला फॉलो कर रहे हैं, ठीक है। बट ऑफ कोर्स
Right, sir.
डिफरेंट इम्प्लीमेंटेशंस में फिर भी थोड़ा थोड़ा डिफरेंस होगा। सो लेट्स से व्हेनेवर यू गो अबाउट यूजिंग एनी लैंग्वेज और एनी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, थोड़ा सा आपको उसकी हेल्प देखनी पड़ेगी एग्जैक्टली वो क्या है, ठीक है। सो फॉर एग्जांपल
ठीक है
आपके
सर,
इवन माइक्रोसॉफ्ट वर्ड में भी रेजेक्स की कैपेबिलिटीज हैं, ठीक है ना। तो बट उनमें क्या क्या फीचर्स इम्प्लीमेंट हुए हुए हैं, क्या क्या नहीं हुए हुए, ऑफ कोर्स यू हैव टू गो डिग डीप एंड फाइंड आउट, ठीक है।
Okay, sir.
ठीक है, मेरे ख्याल से वन मोर थिंग एंड देन आई विल स्टॉप। एक और जो डिसजंक्शन का है वो पाइप करेक्टर है। सो लेट्स से आई राइट so this pipe character basically says that either of these two sequences would be fine, ठीक है। तो this will return either Asim with a capital A and Asim with a small a. तो पाइप सीक्वेंस, पाइप करेक्टर जो है ये आप कह लें कि दो मल्टीपल सीक्वेंसेस के बीच में आप और कर सकते हैं। सो लेट्स से मैं मल्टीपल वर्ड्स डालना चाह रहा हूँ, लेट्स से आसिम पाइप, आसिम, लेट्स से ये वाला आसिम। सो ऑल ऑफ दीज वुड बी फाउंड, ठीक है। सो पाइप character works in this way, the pipe or the vertical bar character. ठीक है, मेरे ख्याल से I think we'll stop here. So any questions?
No, sir.
So okay, so any other comments or any other issues in terms of enrollment or other stuff?
Sir, I have a question. In the last example, where you have used the pipe operator, So like you're saying there can be a combination where capital A from Asim matches with the small a from the other Asim and then makes a word. So can there be other combinations as well?
Combinations I didn't quite understand, because whenever you have a pipe के लेफ्ट साइड पे राइट साइड पे जो भी सीक्वेंस है एज ए होल वो मैच होना चाहिए, बट वो और है, ठीक है ना। तो आप समझ लें कि ये इस तरह है कि आसिम और आसिम, पूरा आसिम आ रहा है तो फिर पकड़ेगा, बट लेट्स से मैं सिर्फ सिम नजर आ रहा है, सिम नहीं कैच होगा, ठीक है।
Okay, so that's why capital A and then small a and then sim comes in the sequence as well.
हाँ, ऊपर फिर मैंने 3 किए ना, 3 और कर दिए ना, वो भी एक ऑप्शन है।
Okay, understand.
आप
Thank you.
हाँ नहीं ठीक है, सही है, वो भी एक ऑप्शन है जी।
So it will return whichever is found first.
नो, इट विल रिटर्न ऑल। ये भी एक इसका रेजेक्स का एक प्रॉपर्टी है कि it returns a set, all the set of words that matches. of course जब हम word पे सर्च करते हैं वो next करके हम पहुंचते हैं, but from a programming language it typically returns a set, ठीक है। so set can be empty of course, मैच नहीं होगा तो empty होगा, but मैच हो रहा है तो multiple words भी हो सकते हैं, ठीक है।
Yes, sir.
anything else?
Sir, one thing is not clear, that entity is the information, right? So can we say it entity is a feature in terms of representation or information context?
I think you probably have to repeat first part, में थोड़ा मिस कर गया, information context और features की क्या बात कर रहे थे?
Sir, I'm saying entity is the information, right? Let's say there is a name, Asim, and the ID 123, right? It's an entity which is an information, textual information. So can we say it is a feature if we talk about representation of the word? Or
it depends on what problem you are trying to solve. So if entities are used in your let's say, let me give an example. Let's say you want to find all you can say paragraphs, or let's say post on Twitter that talk about cars, ठीक है ना। तो अब हमारे पास टास्क होगा कि हमने उस जितने भी ट्वीट्स हैं, ट्वीट्स के वर्ड्स हम देखेंगे और देखेंगे उनमें कार्स के नाम आ रहे हैं कि नहीं आ रहे, टोयोटा आ रहा है या प्रियस आ रहा है या कोई और नाम आ रहा है। so these are entities. so if in the final task of labeling whether a tweet has a car or not में ये information named entity की हम represent कर रहे हैं in some form, so that would then be a feature for this task, ठीक है।
yes, sir, I get it. It's a
You got
problem dependent, right?
हाँ, it's problem dependent.
Yes. Thank
But
you.
वो feature representation क्या होगी, of course वो sequence of characters भी हो सकता है, ID भी हो सकता है, but जैसे मैंने कहा कि आजकल ज़्यादा embedding based होता है, ठीक है ना,
Yes, sir.
vectors होते हैं,
ठीक
ठीक है।
Yes,
So
sir.
anything
Thank you.
else? We are running out of time. Anything else?
सर आप ये स्लाइड्स अपलोड करेंगे LMS पे?
स्लाइड्स मैंने कुछ की हुई है, टेक्स्ट प्रोसेसिंग शायद मैंने नहीं की, वो मैं कर दूंगा जी।
और सर ग्रुप्स का आपको बता रहे थे, ग्रुप के कितने मेंबर होंगे
प्रोजेक्ट के?
यस सर।
प्रोजेक्ट के 2 लोग। 40 स्टूडेंट्स हैं, तो 2 ही आप प्लान करें अभी जी।
ठीक है सर, थैंक यू।
ठीक है।